We're going to turn now to our panel on the future of public interest cybersecurity clinics. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Andreen Soli, who is one of the most thoughtful people you will ever meet on issues of public interest technology, who participates in it, and how it is distinct from other endeavors. Andreen has been the director of the Public Interest Technology University Network at New America since 2018. She joined New America after 20 years of experience working in higher education and the nonprofit sector. We're thrilled to have her here to share her expertise and lead today's discussion. So Andreen, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that introduction. I hope I can live up to what you've just said about me. I'm excited to participate in this conversation. The Public Interest Technology University Network, PITUN for short, is a network of 43 universities and colleges that are working to build out the field of public interest technology more broadly on campuses across the US. PITUN believes strongly in the need to connect students to the things they're learning in the classroom with the real world applications of their skills and knowledge out in the world. We're particularly keen to support and amplify projects that protect the most vulnerable among us online and offline. It's one of the reasons why public interest cybersecurity is so important, and we are happy to support the growth of these projects at universities and colleges, both within the network and outside of the network. So I'm excited to hear about the projects that some of our panelists are working on, and hopefully to learn some more from the chat. So let's get started with our panelists. Beginning with Lily Lin. Lily Lin is a graduate of UC Berkeley with degrees in physics, computer science, computer science, biology, as well as a master's in information management and systems from the School of Information. They are also an alum of the Citizen Clinic and Future of Cybersecurity Reading Group. Currently, they work as a project manager at Microsoft, working with the Microsoft Search, Assistant, and Intelligence Group. Tiffany Rad. Tiffany Rad teaches the Citizen Clinic Practicum at UC Berkeley School of Information, which provides students with real-world experience assisting politically vulnerable organizations and persons around the world to develop and implement sound cybersecurity practices. Tiffany is also the CEO and co-founder of Anatrope Inc., which develops wireless automotive technologies for the security and data analytics industry. And finally, Larry Susskind. Larry Susskind is a Ford Professor of Urban and Environmental Planning at MIT, where he also oversees the MIT Cybersecurity Clinic, providing students with opportunities to help defend American cities, towns, and hospitals that are vulnerable to cyber attacks. Welcome, welcome everyone.
Hi, Andreen.
Hi. Hi all. Let's start with you, Larry. Larry, can you give us a brief history of how the MIT cybersecurity came to be, what types of students participate in it, and what you're most excited about that you're working on right now?
Sure. I started with a question that urban planners, which is the department I teach in, always have, which is how do we make sure infrastructure can work for those that need it most? And if you take a city perspective and talk about threats to critical urban infrastructure, cybersecurity is up at the top of the list right now. Yes, we have legislation pending to try to provide money to build more infrastructure, but urban infrastructure is under attack every day. Not all those attacks are successful, but we know that the levels of attacks are increasing. So we decided at MIT in the urban planning department to create a clinical teaching opportunity so that our students could participate with client communities, cities and towns. It turns out mostly in the Northeast, because we thought originally we'd be going to visit them face to face. We have a broader purview at the moment because we have been doing a lot of our work online with client communities. And so to prepare the students to do that, I needed to call on all of my MIT colleagues in computer science and management and other fields. And I put together 4 one-week modules with support of the America Foundation and Pitt UN, so that we could create an edX course that anybody could take, but in particular, our students could take. And at the end of the 4 weeks, 4 hours a week course, there's an exam, a multiple choice exam. And that exam's important because I can assure communities that say they would like help with the vulnerability assessment, that I'm sending them students that are prepared. Look, they've passed this exam after taking this 4-week course. And so we're now into the 4th or 5th cycle of working with client communities. Communities have found us, particularly in Massachusetts, through the state Mass Cyber Organization. And so there's no problem finding cities and towns that would like help, although we're also now trying to focus on hospitals. And there's no problem preparing students for 4 weeks. But then we have to provide assistance and oversight so that the teams of students working with the client communities go through a process of gathering information, checking the information, working with each community to see whether we can check off on a survey of questions. Are they doing the minimum that they need to be doing? Are they doing basic things effectively? And then on a confidential basis, we give a vulnerability assessment to each of these communities and suggest the kinds of things they might want to work on, even though we can't promise to do them all. We're mostly producing confidential vulnerability assessments for city agencies. The agencies then have to decide what help they're going to get from the consulting world or from other places to implement the improvements that they need to pursue. So the clinic will work with 3 or 4 agencies a semester, every semester. It's very exciting now because there's a coalition of cybersecurity clinics at other universities so that we can learn from each other and share information. The research question, and I'll be very brief, the research question at the top of the list for me and for the state of Massachusetts is, what would a minimum standard of care for cybersecurity look like that you would hold municipal governments to if you were going to offer them the equivalent of assistance if they were attacked? If you were the state, you're going to offer grants, you would want them to work toward meeting a minimum standard of care before they would be eligible for the assistance once they were attacked. I would argue the insurance companies should be doing the same thing, but unfortunately, they're not been interested in this discussion of minimum standard of care. They seem to be willing to sell anybody cybersecurity insurance, any municipality. So standard of care, what should it consist of? What is a minimum? How should that change for cities and towns of different size, or hospitals that serve different communities in different ways? My sense is we're coming closer to knowing what questions need to be addressed by a standard of care. We're in the process of surveying sets of places to see what the prevailing standard of care looks like. So sorry to go on, but that's the topic.
Thank you so much, Larry, for that very thorough overview. I want to bring in Tiffany. Tiffany, you instruct the public interest cybersecurity citizen clinic practicum course at Berkeley. Can you tell us about the kind of work the clinic is doing and the kinds of challenges the clinic clients are facing? What makes public interest cybersecurity different from other cybersecurity endeavors? I think Larry might have hinted at that, but I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah, my background is working in the private sector. So I worked for companies with 100,000 employees. The company had created information technology and cybersecurity products, but those products are very expensive. So when a nonprofit group is looking at how do we do cybersecurity, not only is it a kind of a daunting task because there are so many threats out there, where to start is the question. And also some of the products that are sold and are beyond the budget for most of the nonprofits. So what we do in the clinic is we have politically vulnerable clients, and we do a security assessment for them and make recommendations that are practical and economical for them. And some of the clients that we've had in the past 2 semesters, this is my second semester teaching the clinic, is an organization that's a nonprofit that there was a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and there are many victims of the war, survivors, prisoners of war. So this nonprofit took records of their experiences, what had happened. So they were creating historical documents that there are a couple of universities in the Northeast are going to be analyzing. And they were often attacked, cyber attacked, and also misinformation and disinformation upon all of the clients we've had. This is a concern of theirs, is how do they combat that? How do they recognize that this is happening, what to do about it? So these are some of the challenges that we face with the clients that we have now. And what makes it different for some of the nonprofits is that the ones that we've worked with in the past couple of semesters have had no budget for cybersecurity, have not had cybersecurity before. So we step in really and have to do an assessment of all of both the technical, so the cyber capabilities that they have, what do they have set up for their network, what website, how was it built, what versions is it running? So we take a look at those things. But we also look at other things associated with security for these nonprofits, especially since the directors and the volunteers, excuse me, are at high risk of cyber attack. We look at and talk to them about the physical security they have in their offices, because some of them don't have very much, but they maybe store this information on site on a laptop in a building where they work. Or we look at some of the social media that they use to get information out to the funders. Like, are these, do they connect it? Sometimes they don't know not to connect their private social media accounts with the ones they use publicly for their nonprofits, or their private ones are not marked, their family social media is not locked down as private. So any type of adversary that's targeting them and trying to dox what that means is you get all this information in a malicious way and release their home address, phone number, all personal information, even pictures of their kids, that some of the directors working in these difficult areas really don't want that information becoming public. So we take a look using open source intelligence tools, what we can find. And then we make advising recommendations for them. We don't do any vulnerability scans. We don't pen test their networks. We are consultants. So we spend 6 weeks taking a look at different topics, everything from, like, next week is misinformation, disinformation, what is doxing, what can you do about it, how to lock down social media accounts that are more private and family oriented as opposed to for the nonprofit. And we look at things such as network security. And so it's technical as well as more of the social aspect too. And lastly, one of the things that we're going to be including in the curriculum is about surveillance. And a lot of their volunteers are heavily surveilled by governments in which they work. We have one client in Central America now that is very much surveilled. They're actually supporting a criminal case against 2 former generals of a military that were accused of mass murders in the 1990s and into 80s and 90s. And they're just facing trial now. And this nonprofit is very concerned about their cybersecurity because they're already under attack, because they're supporting these war criminals going to jail. So this is the kind of element that we have in Berkeley Cybersecurity Clinic. We have clients that are at very high risk for things happening online, but their physical security and giving recommendations of how to travel securely, how to use full disk encryption, what not to click on. So we have a training program that we found for free. Again, we try to make the tools very, very low cost or free that we recommend, but a training program on how to identify phishing emails. So basic cybersecurity, that's very different than what a lot of these students have experienced working for big companies in the San Francisco area. And where we start out with, okay, we have no budget. How can we help these organizations that very much need our help? So the work is very worthwhile. I enjoy it a lot, and I love seeing the students when they give their final presentations. The clients in the past have been so relieved that they know where to start. This huge topic has suddenly become something more manageable, that we give practical and not tech speak recommendations. And we don't say, hey, you're going to need a $100,000 budget to do this. The last semester, I think the budget was probably $100 a year for the recommendations that we had. So that's what we do. And those are some of the challenges we face.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. One thing before I move on to Lily, just ask you a quick question about who are the types of students who hear cybersecurity? They have a particular set in their head.
The past 2 semesters we have had in the Mike's program, all with cybersecurity backgrounds, but next semester it's going to be different. We found that we're looking for students that have backgrounds also in law and policy. And these types of backgrounds will help round out the team, because sometimes when we're looking at legislation such as European privacy legislation, having someone who has a different type of background to cybersecurity to do that analysis and to make some recommendations for the client would be fantastic. So we're branching out and bringing in more students from different programs at Berkeley, and we're very excited for this influx of some new students and some new opinions to the team, because really looking at what you need to accomplish, it's not just all technical. You got to look at the human elements of, like, how are people using this cybersecurity? If we create a system that's too technical, too hard to access, no one's going to use it. And it's kind of useless that way. But like human machine interface, people with these types of backgrounds, it's different. So we want more opinions based on this. So that's why we're expanding the program. It used to be like this at Berkeley, but the program moved to the Mike's program. But now we're inviting more students to apply for the semester starting in January.
Thanks for that. It's really good to know that, because I think coming out of the nonprofit space, I know that it attracts a wide variety of folks. Lily, you bring a unique perspective to the panel as one of the first Citizen Clinic alumni. How did your experience with the clinic and exposure to public interest cybersecurity influence your career path and your work in industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely would say that I wouldn't still be at Microsoft if it wasn't for the clinic, because I was a former engineer after graduating from Berkeley the first time in Silicon Valley, went through a lot of tech startups, did the whole engineering bit, and then came to the information school at Berkeley because I felt like that was an inadequate knowledge base of, I can build stuff, but why are we building it? For what reasons? And I definitely had the experience of working for startups and making some rather large cybersecurity decisions as a junior engineer for the entire organization, and arguing back very suspicious ass. So, like, to me, the Citizen Clinic experience is really important to me, because that was how I was able to interact with. So my particular research interest is on groups that are traditionally marginalized, so disadvantaged groups. So to me, there's a lot of classes I want to take at Berkeley, but I think I had like 3 classes that like conflicted with it. But I chose to do Citizen Clinic because it was just like, this is what I'm really interested in. I want to understand how technology impacts marginalized populations and how we can build for it. Now, at Microsoft, as a product manager, essentially, we call it program management, but as a product owner, I don't directly work on security, but the group that I work for is, this will probably be more obvious than what it's currently called, which I work for the team that's formerly known as Cortana, which I won't go into, but you can imagine a little bit kind of the decisions that we've made as product owners and thinking about security, thinking about what's creepy and not creepy, why we would say we're the team formerly known as Cortana. We still, so kind of what Citizen Clinic taught me is that I think the clinics are doing great work, but the thing that we keep coming back to is that technology needs to be easy. Technology needs to be easy for the users, and they need to be designed with the problems in mind for people. And so the answers isn't in how do we essentially like make these technologies that are built with different intentions in place work for people with like different economic needs and different security issues. Like, we're never going to have products that don't have severe gaps for disadvantaged groups where they need to essentially have the funding to make up for that gap, unless we're designing future technology to think about the future infrastructure, the future needs. So I'm still exploring and learning, but the reason I chose to go with a large company after my experience at Citizen Clinic is, one of the things that we found in Citizen Clinic is a lot of people use Microsoft products, Google products. They're stuck into these technology silos where we can say like, hey, there's this robust, really great open source thing, go do it. But unless they have their own engineer, their own IT team, like that, those are not real options unless, if like it gets back to a budgeting issue. So what I'm really interested in and kind of what I'm seeing kind of, I guess, in a way, like continuing with the research practicum kind of ideology is I'm at Microsoft because I'm really interested in, being a part of this kind of startup-y team within it, as we're building kind of what we see as the future intelligence of Microsoft. I'm a huge advocate for like bringing in disadvantaged populations and user research practices. And what I'm really curious about is two parts. One, how much can product owners and product managers play a role in creating future products that take into those things in consideration, and how much can we get it to align with business interests? Because that's the usual reason these things don't happen. And then the second part of my interest is as a tech employee, in a large company instead of a startup, how much impact can I have trying to pitch for and guide product development that really feel my interests, which are designing for disadvantaged populations as an employee within a large company. Because my previous experience is it's really hard to get that to happen if you're operating as a nonprofit or a student or an academic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think what I really liked hearing is that you have to consider the needs of the population first before you begin to design, right? And so it's really helpful to hear that through line through all of the speakers. And so I want to throw a question out to everyone as we come to the end of this panel. I'm going to start back again with Larry. And the question is, as someone who has pioneered public interest cybersecurity clinics, what advice do you have for people interested in starting a clinic? Just a couple of tips for someone who said, this is great, I just want to figure out how do I get started. So Larry, ahead.
Someone needs to take the lead who has the idea that this is part of fulfilling their institution's social responsibilities. And this is not just an opportunity for technical training for people who need to learn stuff. And if you understand that we're talking about institutions like colleges and universities, but also large companies, have social responsibilities, and one of them is to assist those in enhancing their cybersecurity who don't presently know how or have the capacity to do that, then what they're doing is partnering with those places to build their capacity. And if you start with someone who thinks that they're doing this for that reason, and you're looking for partners who you want to work with to build capacity, the rest will take care of itself.
Thank you. And I want to stay on time, but I just want to give Tiffany 1 second to give a little advice for anyone else who's thinking about a clinic.
If you're thinking about starting a clinic, make sure that you create a team where there's someone who's a good communicator as well, leading the team, both from the student groups and an instructor, because sometimes when you go to a nonprofit that's they're representing a group that's already been marginalized and already had perhaps concerns about government surveillance, things like that. It's someone that can communicate to them to create the trust relationship, because asking them like, hey, I'm going to bring in a group of 18 students to take a look at all your vulnerabilities. It's something that takes trust. So it's something that you need to create a team that's diverse enough that can create that trust relationship and maintain it throughout the course of the semester.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Tiffany. And thank you, Lily. And thank you all for participants, panelists, as well as listeners. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about Cybersecurity Clinic.